Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Training here in Tokyo. And my special guest today is Guillaume Hansali, who is the Country Manager for Keywords Studios.
Hi.
Well, I've dealt with Keywords International before you changed the name, quite a few years ago, actually before COVID. And you have now got this empire here. It's grown from, I think when I was dealing with Keywords, I'm thinking 80 people or something like that. And you told me the other day 500.
Yeah, close to 500.
That's incredible growth, right through COVID too, by the way, which is even more impressive. So people may not be familiar with Keywords. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so Keyword Studios, originally Keyword International, we were specialized in localization. So in a way, it's in the name, Keywords. And it's a company that was started in Ireland by a couple of Italians, Giorgio and Teresa. And so Teresa was a translator, and Giorgio was an entrepreneur, and he wanted to do something with his wife. And she said, okay, we can start a company, but I have two options. I want to be working in an English-speaking country and with a lot of green. And that's why they chose Ireland, and they started a business in Dublin. They very quickly, I think Microsoft was one of our first clients, and very early they found that most of their clients, surrounded around gaming, and so they decided to really specialize in localization for gaming.
So someone would produce a game in English, and they'd localize it into Japanese,
other languages,
Chinese, French, Italian, whatever like
Correct,
that.
yes.
Okay.
And so the business grew slowly, but then they brought Andrew Day, who's our former CEO, and he had a vision to really scale the business by doing a lot of acquisition. And so he saw, especially for localization, that there was a huge market without necessarily a lot of supply, and especially in gaming. And so he started acquiring businesses specialized in localization, building a company. We went public in 2013, I believe. At the time, we were 270 people.
Globally.
Globally.
It's 500 in Japan now. So how many is it globally now?
It's 13,000.
Oh, wow. So 270 to 13,000.
So it's roughly 50% growth every year, year after year.
Wow.
But around 2014, 2015, we started to do more than just localization. We started to see potential in cross-selling. I think the first thing we started to do outside of localization was what we call LQA, which is language quality assurance. And that was really a direct extension of what we were doing. From there, we started doing functional QA, what we call testing, debugging. Then we started acquiring other businesses like art production, marketing, and development. And now we have the full suite of the whole ecosystem of the business.
Almost total vertical integration now.
Wow. But still with a combination of a lot of the growth was organic, but a lot of the growth was also inorganic by acquiring high quality studios that brought, very strong specialty in maybe, a specific genre of gaming or a specific technology or platform.
So I guess that means you actually had to acquire companies here in Japan too, to go from 80 to 500 in such a relatively short space of time.
Yeah.
So you bought up local Japanese companies.
Correct. And so that's actually how I ended up at Keywords. So
you got bought.
I got bought. Yeah. And I came with the furniture, as we say. It was in 2019. So in Japan, we've been around for, I think they started the business in 2009, and it was just localization. Then in 2011, I think we started doing LQA. That took off. So originally it was 20 people. We grew to 50, 80 people. 2015, they added what we call player support, customer support, which also really took off quite well in Japan. And so when we were acquired, Wizcorp in 2019, they already had 300 people. 200 to 250, 300 people. And so we joined roughly 40, 50 people but specializing in development. And so, yeah, I joined in 2019. I stayed the sort of CEO of the company that was acquired, like Wizcorp, for a couple of years. And then I had the opportunity to become the country manager here in 2022.
Okay. So, incredible expansion, rapid, profitable, impressive. How did you wind up in Japan? How did you wind up in this industry? Give us some of the background on your career.
So it's been a random succession of events.
Well, random, not perfectly planned.
Oh no. I don't think in my career, if I look back in almost 20 years of career, I don't think I could have predicted where I would be 6 months later.
Even 6 months?
Even 6 months, at any point in my career. So originally, I'm from France. I studied math and then computer science. I was programming as a hobby from when I was very little, and I had this passion for Japan. So
why did you have a passion for Japan? Sitting in France.
I don't know. I think it was a combination of anime, manga, all the things we would see from Japan that just look not exotic. They look like nice. I don't have any other way to put it. Like they look different, but not too different. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of things I would perceive through anime and manga that would resonate more with me in a way. And so when I started when I was in college, you have a lot of free time. One of the hobbies I had was to study Japanese. So I would study Japanese. There were a lot of Japanese people studying French in the city I lived in. And so I would make a lot of Japanese friends. We would do language exchanges. And my desire to go to Japan just grew. And when I graduated in 2006, I just wanted to go to Japan. I had absolutely no plan whatsoever. I just wanted to go to Japan. And the job market at the time wasn't great. And I had also a very narrow vision of what work was. And so it felt like, I'm going to end up in a company that I don't like, to do a job I hate, and I'm going to be stuck for the rest of my life. Like that was literally super narrow vision I had of work and life. And so I think I just escaped from reality and just like, Japan is my passion. I want to go there. All right, working holiday visa 1 year. I take an open plane ticket 1 year. So it's like insurance policy. So my mom would let me go. I think I had maybe €1,000 on my bank account. I could stay at a friend's apartment for a couple of weeks, and that was it. That's all the plans I had.
Right.
And I came in Japan. Very rapidly, my friend made it clear that he wanted me to have my own apartment. So I had to find a guest house, and the guest house cost like €400 per month. And so I could see I wouldn't be able to stay very long.
Stay very long, yeah.
I had this hope that maybe I could survive teaching French. That didn't work out. And so I was basically on the job market. At the time, there was Craigslist and all these things. And so I made up a resume because I had no experience. So disclaimer, I'm not advising to make up your resume, but that's what I did at the time. I thought they'd never be able to check all the references anyway. So I put like experiences at sort of mid-sized companies in France as a programmer, whatever. And I just found one job, very small company, a Yugen Gaisha. They don't exist anymore.
Very small, not even a KK, right?
Yeah. And the boss was half Brazilian, half Japanese. And I just found a job and started working. I was paid 180,000 yen per month. I didn't have a contract. I didn't have social insurance. I worked 300 hours per month. But I could stay in Japan, and that's all that mattered to me at the time. But I learned so much with that job because all the clients were Japanese. So I had to learn a lot of vocabulary.
What was the actual work you were doing?
So I was a system engineer consultant. So it was mainly web technologies, and so we would work with clients that needed customized websites or some services to, a platform to make calculations or things like that, basically. And I would spend some time with the clients to get the requirements, translate all the requirements in English, had other programmers basically develop the thing. I would be reviewing and taking care of the deliveries. But it was a very, very small company. Basically, it was my boss, me, and one other programmer in Brazil. Based in Gotanda, and my boss lived in Sodegaura. So sometimes he wouldn't come to the office because it was very, very far. Interesting experience. But I learned a lot about Japanese. So my level of Japanese really increased exponentially at the time. I also learned about how to talk to clients, how to get requirements. But I just couldn't stay in that company because, well, I didn't have a contract. And my salary was below the sort of threshold to get a visa. So I knew that if I stayed too long in that company, I wouldn't be able to renew my visa. So I had to leave.
No pay rise involved there at all.
I tried, but he
said no.
He was really a great, and he was a great mentor to me, but he wasn't really good with sales. And so a lot of the projects he had weren't very well, good paying projects. And so it was a tough decision for both of us. But I decided to get back to the job market, found another job for a company in Osaka, but that was starting a branch in Tokyo. So that was great. I went there, spent time with the team in Osaka. It was really, really cool. And then we stopped working in the Tokyo branch, and we realized that there's no work. So he started the branch. He had like one project, but didn't have more sales pipeline. So after a month, we ended up having nothing to do.
This is again what type of work?
Yeah, web development.
Same.
Yeah, kind of same thing. And so after 3 months, I made a decision to say, okay, I need to find something else because I don't see that, And so then I get my third job.
You think about this, they've got a successful operation in Osaka, presumably. They decide to open the operation in Tokyo, and they don't have any business in the pipeline. What crazy sort of business is this,
They I don't know, they thought, and it was 2007, so it's just before Lehman Shock.
Yeah.
And that's actually an important point because Lehman Shock was sort of very like a determining factor of the business we started afterwards. But so I do that for 3 months, change again. Now I start working for a company that developed a web browser. Their thought process was that, it's the door to the internet. And so they made a sort of branded web browser that they would customize for brands like Toyota or Yahoo. So you could have ads on the browser and affiliation. So every time you would be using a search engine and click on an ad, they would get a small percentage through affiliation. That was the business. And that was fascinating because I was hired as the first non-Japanese employee.
So why would they hire a non-Japanese employee for something that's totally local?
Because they wanted to get into the fast track. So Jetro was overseeing a lot of their business, and they had a trip planned to the Silicon Valley to meet with investors. But the CEO couldn't speak English. So he was looking for someone with a technical background.
Highly ambitious. I'm going to crack Silicon Valley. English didn't follow that at school. Yeah.
And so I ended up going with him.
You've had a very interesting array of bosses, I have to say. If I think back, like the sort of the decision making here on the boss level is like fascinating. Anyway, please keep going.
Yeah. So no, I don't. Yeah, I've worked with very unorthodox bosses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, geez, I'm such a boring boss by comparison.
And so we go to Silicon Valley, and I got to visit Google, Googleplex and Salesforce.com and all these companies in 2007. And so it was a pretty cool experience. getting free juice and meal in the Googleplex canteen. And I also end up doing presentation in front of many investors, which was a fascinating experience. I get to learn more about venture capital, about investment, about the idea of startups in terms of, the whole startup ecosystem, basically. So it starts planting seeds in my head about, well, maybe I could be an entrepreneur someday. And what happened next is that, so we do all the things, it goes well, and then we go back to Japan, and then he just asked me to be a web developer. And I have nothing else to do related to all that interesting part of the business, just doing CSS and HTML and websites, and that's it. And so I got a lot of time on my hand, and I start reading self-help books and things like that. I get across the famous Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Read that, gets inspired, and so like, oh, well, actually, maybe I could do my own thing. And so eventually I quit the company and I start Wizcorp in 2008.
The name was?
Wizcorp.
Wizcorp.
Wizard Corporation.
Wizcorp. Okay.
We were the incorporated wizards. So it was coming from Wizards of the Web. And at the time, the sort of positioning we had is 2008, so Lehman shock. A lot of companies go bankrupt, and it's the rise of open source technology. So open source technology is becoming a big thing, but it's only in English. Most of the technologies are in English, and as you probably know, especially at the time, most engineers in Japan don't read English.
And still don't.
It's better. It's better than at the time. So we saw that sort of window of opportunity. There is a latency between when open source technology is developed and when it's actually translated, localized in Japanese. So we saw an opportunity to disrupt the business model. At the time, if you wanted a website, you would work with a web agency. They would have proprietary software. They would license to you and charge for the customization. And so we would just get, it's like, well, we're not going to charge for the license of the software. License is free. So we just charge for the customization. So basically, you pay for what, differentiates your business. Everything that's common, you don't have to pay for it. And that's how we started. But, being the sort of...
that would have been just on a scale of, say, 1 to 100. Would that have reduced their expenditure by 10%, 30%, 50%?
Or more than 50%, yeah.
How much? 60, 70?
Oh, yeah.
So you're coming at a 60, 70% discount to the competitor.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Because all these frameworks and platforms, they needed a lot of work to maintain. And doing all the features. And now with the open source model, you have thousands of developers doing that for free. So literally, you're just charging for the customization of the website. So yeah, we could be 60, 70, 80% cheaper than the competition, at least for the first 6 months. And then people started to
customize more.
To customize more, and they started to use more of the open source technologies.
They actually want some programming done to do that part of it.
So that's how we got started. But again, so I started the business because it felt that other people are doing it, why not, right? But I didn't have any money.
So did you go back to Silicon Valley and get some dough?
No. And that's also, I guess, the beauty of doing something with web technologies is that you don't need any investments, really. Like, as long as you have a computer and an internet connection, and with open source technology, you don't even have to pay for license for software. So it's basically just your time. But the thing is, I didn't have clients. I didn't know how to prospect clients. I had never sell anything in my life. I didn't understand accounting, taxes, or anything. Like, it was completely random, just like, hey, let's start a business. Now, the one thing that sort of really pushed me to over the edge was the company in Osaka. So I had kept like a good relationship with them, and he contacted me. He's like, oh, well, if you're starting a company, I have some work for you. Like, oh, okay. And he gave me my first project, which sort of started, wasn't much, but, it sort of demonstrated the fact that I can actually make money myself without being part of a company. And so I didn't have any money, right? So in 2008, it was a few years after they got rid of the minimum requirements in terms of working capital. Mm-hmm. And so when I started the company, I asked my lawyer, what's the sort of minimum working capital you need? Because I really don't have much money.
1 yen.
And they say 1 yen. I say, okay.
I got 1 yen.
I got 1 yen. So
I
I
found
started
it on the pavement just a minute ago.
So I literally started Wizcorp with 1 yen, and it was working capital 1 yen. Because if I put like 100,000 yen, 200, it looks bad anyway. So at least let's make it.
Yeah, you either got to have
funny.
a lot or don't worry about it, right?
Yeah, it's like 1 yen. At least people are going to be puzzled. It's like, what is that? But just to show you how clueless I was, we closed the first year. Close. It's the concept I didn't really understand, but like we closed the first year. And then I do a networking event and I meet an accountant. And he provides accounting services and asks me, so who's doing your tax return? I was like, what are you talking about? Well, you've closed your first year of business, right? It's like, yeah, you need to pay taxes. Oh. That's the level of cluelessness. And I say, well, how much does it cost? It's like, cost that much? Like, I don't have that money. Like, okay, I can give you a price for the first year, but yeah. So it just shows that even if you don't know, you can kind of, figure out along the way. So long story short, we get some luck, we get some interesting projects, we start growing the company. And when we're around 20 people, around like 2011, we start developing our own technology, which is mostly back-end technology. By then, we had moved to gaming. So we had the opportunity to work on a game in 2010. And some of my partners at the time were really hardcore gamers. And so they said, like, look, we need to game. It's more interesting than websites.
So that means that you brought on partners into the
Yes.
business to fund it, basically, internally?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. People would bring like different expertise. So I was more like the engineer, doing engineer, sales, etc. But I didn't have like a lot of the design, art production, and things like that. So one of my partners was bringing that, the creative side.
How do you
design.
find these partners? This is just random again? You just...
So the first one happened to be a very good friend. I had known him since back in college. It was from France as well. So others, Craigslist. Yeah, we hired our CTO and VP of engineering with Craigslist. We still remember doing the interview in a Denny's restaurant. And somehow they both believed that we only have one head count. And so they thought they were in competition for the first 2 months. So anyway, long story. But yeah, we start to have some success. We grow the business. We see potential with the technology. Now we get like, oh, maybe we have an opportunity to go the fast track and really grow and make a big business. I remember all the stories I hear, from the startups in Silicon Valley, and I'm starting to be in that thought process. And we have an opportunity. Someone invests in Wizcorp to scale the business. So we got our first investor. We do a first Series A fundraising. Then we get another one a year later, much larger valuation. We start scaling the team. We get to almost 50 people. So now our burn rate is just going through the roof. But we have a pretty solid team. But we put all our eggs in one basket. Because again, we're clueless, so we make all the mistakes in the book, and we actually lose that client. So in January 2013, we have 45 people on the payroll, 0 projects, 0 source of revenue. And we're like, okay, what do we do? And again, we make all the mistakes. So instead of severely reducing the team, we're like, oh, but we've built this amazing team and with this technology, and so what do? Well, we borrow money. And we got in debt, and we start looking for more projects. We get lucky to find a project that keeps us alive. Eventually, we have to reduce the team. Far too late. but we have to go through that painful learning. And then we reach a point where we feel, okay, we can't grow on our own. We need more structure. We need someone who can really help us. And so we get in touch with a French company called Ankama that develops their own games. And they were interested in the technology we had to port one of their games. Their biggest game was in Flash. I don't know if you remember Flash. And they wanted to convert it to HTML5 so they could target smartphones. And works well, we start working together, and they decide to buy us. And so we get acquired 2014. The first few years go well. Eventually, we find that the synergies are pretty limited. And we collectively decide that, okay, maybe we should find another buyer. So we get on the market again, and this time we meet with Keywords, and Keywords acquire Wizcorp in 2019.
So the French company didn't have a majority share of Wizcorp.
Oh, they did. They bought us 100%.
So how does the minority partner sell the company to Keywords?
So basically what happened is eventually we had this conversation where, does it make sense for you to have us?
Right.
And to them, it wasn't. It's like,
the synergy is not there.
Yeah, synergy is not there. It's noise.
So you want to depart, that's okay.
So I asked them, like, do you want me to find another buyer? And they said, yes. Okay. And that's why and then I introduced MQ. Was like, well, there's an interested party. Now I'm going to recuse myself.
How did Keywords know you even existed? How did that come about?
I knew someone who had been acquired by Keywords a couple of years earlier. But it's always like things that you can't really predict. But the moment I had the conversation with Ankama saying, okay, do you want me to look for another buyer? They said, yes, okay. I think 2 weeks later, this friend that I hadn't talked for like 2 years tell me, by the way, would you be interested in being acquired? Because Keywords is looking for a game dev studio in Japan. And I'm like, as a matter of fact, yes. So
the karma and all this is incredible, isn't it? It's just like a random series of events, things that happen for you. Amazing, totally amazing.
So really, that's why I can't. When people tell me like how, it's like, honestly, I don't know. It's just.
Well, I hope your story is encouraging a lot of potential entrepreneurs out there, because if you think about the choices you made, the decisions you took, the steps that happened, the sequencing of things, and yet
here we are.
Here you are, It is amazing. It is amazing.
But I think if I look back, there's still a few things that I believe, in a way, we say luck is when preparation meets opportunity, but it's also, you can make your own luck in a sense, like, by being consistent, by being, having very high ethics when it comes to work. I think we always had a very high ethic. Always keep your promises, always trying to over-deliver, always trying to help. I really believed in the idea of, give as much as you can afford, because eventually things comes back.
And when you came into Keywords acquired you, what role did they give you inside Keywords? Because Chris was still running.
Yes, sure. So Keywords model, especially for game development studios, and that's also one of the key differentiator with our competitors, is that when it comes to localization, these services tend to be very streamlined. Meaning, yes, there are some nuances in terms of how the service is delivered, but the core service is the same. So it makes sense to really consolidate operations and consolidate process. For game dev, because we've positioned ourselves as boutique, highly specialized developers, we're not trying to provide mass scale, hey, we give you 500 low-cost programmers. That's never been what Keywords does. We're like, well, if you want a real-time strategy game, we have the best studios in the world to do that. If you want this kind of action games, we have the best studios in the world who do that. Meaning all studios have different cultures, they work differently, they attract different talents. So when it comes to game dev, the Keywords always try to preserve that ownership, that leadership. And so that's why studios keep their brand. So Wizcorp still exists as of today as its own brand and own entity. And they give a lot of flexibility in the way the studios are led. So when I joined, I was still the CEO of Wizcorp within the Keyword Studio. As a subsidiary within the
mothership.
Yes. So I had my own P&L, I had my own objectives. Keywords would challenge me on some of my objectives, for example. And the idea was, instead of consolidating, was more to try to find ways to collaborate. Now, there are a few non-negligibles, for example, IT, InfoSec, HR, legal, things like that. Well, let's use the group functions because, well, they're much bigger. And when you're a 13,000 people group, you have access to pretty strong InfoSec that you wouldn't have access to if you were smaller studios. But the idea is you're still leading your business. So that's what I was doing the first few years within Keywords, but still doing our own business. I was reporting to Chris Kennedy. But really it was more about, agreeing on objectives and sort of needs we had in terms of budget, committing on the P&L and just, operating. So I did that from 2019 to 2022. Eventually, Chris Kennedy decided to move on. He had experienced this insane growth from 10, 20 people in 2019 to like almost 500 people, and he wanted to do something else. And so he first looked for another person to take over. So we had another general manager for a couple of years. Didn't necessarily work out well. And so when they decided to find someone else, this is when I basically raised my hand.
So you raised your hand. You said, yeah, I want to do that. Yeah. Fascinating.
So, very long story.
But fascinating. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
No.
You couldn't make this stuff up. It's incredible. So thinking back, to the different roles you've had as a leader, and you've been through an incredible journey, but what things have you found worked well to get people engaged to follow you as the leader over the years you've been in Japan?
So I think it's something I've been starting to think more intentionally over the last few years. But all of it was intuition. I guess you try things and things work, things don't work, and you can't necessarily articulate why they work, but you're more like, okay, this seems to work. But I think
what worked then?
So we always talk about like vision. Yes, I think having a vision is good to rally people. But usually I think it's more about being a strong role model. And leading a 20 people company and a 400 people company are two different businesses. Like it's completely different. Like when you're 20 people, you basically embody culture. Like, people work with you, they work for you, that you are basically the company. And I think it's about values, what you value, your principles as a human being, as a boss. And yeah, I think you lead by example, you lead by being the toll gate, you lead by, putting norms maybe in a way. But then when you start to be bigger, today I 400 people, 500 people, you can't know them all. So I spend time mainly with managers, right? Then it becomes a bit more about group values. What I've experienced over the years is that organizations of different sizes, of different phases in their growth, are going to require different styles of leadership in a way. And what's interesting is you also grow as a leader, because when I studied, I was 25. I had clueless, didn't know anything. So you build that intuition of trying things. Some things work, some things don't. For example, one of the things took me a long time at first was to separate myself from the company. So meaning that I wasn't selling Wizcorp, I was selling Guillaume Hansali. I was the brand. And so sometimes, I would side on the clients rather than siding on the employees. Because I committed to the clients. I promised the clients, and now, I would become the toll gate, and I would, tell the employees like, no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We promised we need to exceed these expectations. Because it felt like I wasn't selling Wizcorp, I was selling myself, and I couldn't really dissociate both. I think we started having a bit more success when I managed to do that, to say like, oh wait, I need to stop selling myself. I need to start selling Wizcorp. And so how can I sell Wizcorp? But first, I need to make sure that clients are going to meet other people than me. I need
leverage.
I need to also have them realize that they are going to get the same client experience with anyone in the organization, not just me. And so it was more about trying to put on paper, okay, what does it mean to work with Wizcorp? What are the things we value? What are the things we care about? And why people should care about that? And also, when we started to be clear about that, and also clear about the service we were providing and the kinds of clients we would be providing that to, then everything becomes much clearer. Because employees feel that what we sell to clients is what we sell to them. There's no discrepancy. There's no dissonance between the two, and that's really, really important. And so they can start embodying the values. They can start embodying these principles, because they can see that that's literally what we are selling the clients.
But at the human level, like we're talking very macro now, but I'm thinking more about, different times you've had small numbers of people working for you, and as you say, that it gets larger and larger. People have to follow you as a person, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not machines.
No.
They're not just pawns on the chessboard here. They're individuals. So what things did you find at the personal level, at the human level, worked well to get people to be engaged, to follow and trust you as their leader?
I think trust is really a good consistency. I think in a way I like to define trust by the ability to predict. You trust someone because you can predict their behaviors. They're not going to do something very weird. Like, that in these kind of situations, they're going to behave in a certain way. And so the way I find I can build trust is really by being highly consistent with my behaviors, with my mood.
Now, how do you control that? Everyone has a bad day. You have a spouse, I don't know if you have children or not, but you have kids that have trouble, your spouse has trouble, they give you trouble. You got an argument at home, you bring that argument with you, you're still replaying the argument in your head when you get to work. Health is not good one day, or, also you stub your toe. How do you control it?
So I think I'm naturally chill. So I've never been, a explosive person. So you're
betraying your French roots here. We're expecting more of a Latin temperament here, something a bit more.
So I'm more on the north side, maybe. Who knows? So I don't really have like mood swings. I can be frustrated. I can be angry. I can be tired. And clearly there were times where I showed impatience, but usually I'm pretty consistent mood-wise. And also, I think something I tried to develop early on was some form of vulnerability, which is really hard. Some type of? Vulnerability.
Vulnerability, okay, yeah, all right.
Of being okay to say, I don't know. That was the hardest thing for me. Because I like to know things and I like to show people that I know things. Which was one of the drives, especially when you start selling yourself as a consultant, well, you're supposed to know more than your clients, right? And so not having an answer feels almost like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. Like I can't let that happen, right? And one also of the misconceptions you have when you start your business is like, well, as the captain of the of the ship, I need to have every answers. Otherwise, people are just going to escape. They're going to be like, oh my God, he's a fraud. He doesn't know what he's doing. We need to escape, right? The first few years were a bit like that, where I would never say, I don't know. And even when clearly I was wrong on something, I would always find a way to justify it. And
where was the turning point where you realized, okay, it's okay to say I'm not perfect, I don't know everything, and I have vulnerabilities, or I make mistakes like every other human being? What was the sort of turning point? Or was it is over a gradual period of time? What was the change?
It's gradual, but I think it really was with a few conversations I had with some of my a bit more senior staff, who basically came to me and said, like, you don't need to have answers to everything.
They allowed your vulnerability.
Yeah. And
they said it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah. It's like, we're not following you because you have any answers. We follow you because we like your principles. We like the sort of vision not because you know everything. And also, I think at one point, Steve Jobs, also all these interviews where you say, A players hire A players, you need to hire people who are smarter than you, etc., etc. And when I started to get that, to have programmers who in the company were clearly way more talented than me, that's when I started to say, like, oh, wait, I don't need to be smarter. I don't need to know more than them. That's actually fun. And I think that's when I started to be more vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, it's way easier to build trust, I feel, because people can be open about their own vulnerabilities. And then you can be transparent about the process.
There's also that aspect of, if you are Mr. or Miss Perfect, that creates a lot of pressure on the team. Because, I work for Mr. and Miss Perfect here, and therefore I'm not perfect. I feel stress. I feel pressure. I feel, oh, gee, what if I don't measure up? I'm under this constant, it's too much sun. I'm getting sunburn over here from these people. Whereas if you are, yes, I have skills and you have skills, and we complement each other, and we work together, and we have a common vision, common values, and we're going to do a good job. Well, you admit you're not perfect, they can admit they're not perfect, and everyone can get on with their job, basically. Interesting.
And I think what's really hard in the beginning is that, it's a competitive industry, and so you need to strive for excellence, because if you're not, then, it's a race to the bottom. So that's one of the things we also recognize very early on, is that we don't want to do a race to the bottom. We want to be able to sell a premium service by being either better than others or more efficient or more innovative. But then that means we need to strive for excellence. And it's really hard to, in one hand, strive for excellence, and the other hand saying, oh, there's stuff we don't know, right? But I think the sort of, light bulb moment happened when I realized that excellence doesn't mean, it's not necessarily about the outcome, but more the process. It's like,
why did that light bulb moment come? And what triggered that idea for you?
I think that really came when we started working on very very disruptive, innovative projects where literally we don't know. We don't know if it's actually going to work. Like, we're working on a proof of concept, on a demo. We believe theoretically it could work, but we have no idea. And so obviously as a company, we can say, like, yeah, we guarantee it's going to work. That would be suicide. And so we need to have that conversation with the client saying, like, we believe there's an opportunity to do something really cool, and we want to try. It's going to cost some money. We can't guarantee it's going to work. But then you still need to be able to justify why the company should invest in you to do that. And so you're going to say, well, we're going to work very hard. And worst case scenario, you get all the learning, meaning that even if the proof of concept doesn't work, we'll share all the documentations, all the thought process that was into it. And I think that's when we realize, oh, well, actually, that's the work. The work we're doing is not the actual product we're developing, it's the learning experience. And so excellence just means we need to do our homeworks very seriously, work hard at that, but we don't need to whip ourselves when the outcome is not as expected.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. You probably had to bring in more structures because, you had a very laissez-faire approach, and then as you start to talk about disruptive technologies, a lot of trust of this will probably work, we're not exactly sure, but here we're going to come up with the learnings and, there's, at one point in time, there's a structure around how to do that and a structure to capture what you've learnt so that you can actually show, oh, this is how it worked, So I guess that also was something that you probably hadn't in place before. It was probably maybe more creative.
Yeah.
But now we have to capture the creativity and then define it, how we made it so we can do it again somewhere else. Is that also a process that came in?
No, very fair. I think there is a word for that, right? Outcoming is when you judge the quality of a decision by its outcome, which is a fallacy, because there are a lot of parameters that are not within your control, right?
You call that outcoming.
Yeah, I think the term is it's called outcoming. And it's hindsight fallacy of saying we made the right decisions because we were successful. It's maybe we were lucky.
Maybe just lucky,
And so you can't really replicate that, and so you can't really even say it's an institutional learning. Not really But if you use a process that's always the same, and that process delivers learning, then that's something you can replicate, and then you build your intuition. And if you do that enough times, then you develop that intuition of what is actually possible. You can see that with programmers, developers, for example. When they start at Wizcorp, the first thing we really teach them is how to do estimations by estimating and failing really badly and learning from that. So a junior engineer, they have no clue how to estimate stuff. They're always completely off. They're going to look at the task and they are going, oh, that's going to take a week and it's going to take 2 months, or the other way around. They're going to let's take a month and they're done in 3 days. They have no idea how to estimate because there's the unknown basically, right? What's fascinating is with 10 years, 15 years of experience, senior developers can estimate things they've never done before. And they don't even know if it's actually possible. And they still can give very accurate estimations. Because they've learned through intuition, through the same process of trying to imagine what the problem is, how you would go about solving it, the sort of issues you get along the way, the kind of friction points, based on that complexity, when you're going to integrate things, how much buffer you're going to need, they're able to intuit that, and that's why they can give you very good estimations. I think as we learn as an institution, we got really better at doing these estimations, and we got really good at documenting them. documenting the actual thought process about why we believe it's going to, take that much.
So just on that, I mean, there's, as you say, there's a lot of creativity involved in this. So how do you go about capturing that creativity or inspiring that creativity? Because, people have ideas, but often, the companies don't tap into the ideas, or they don't feel there's a mechanism for their ideas to be heard, or, the ideas are left in their heads and they never come out, and get used. So what have you found works well in getting ideas out of people?
It's really challenging. So first, I'm not a big believer in ideas. To me, ideas are cheap. Execution is really expensive. So we've tried many things over the years. Like we've tried brainstorming. We've tried. What I find is that usually you need a lot of structure, and you need clear objectives around the process of ideation. We need constraints. Without constraints, it just goes all over the place. And
but that concept, has been around for a long time. I remember, if you remember De Bono and his 6 thinking hats, and the black hat was the negative, doing some evaluation, discrimination of the ideas and that type of thing. And so those concepts, are well established. There's nothing new there, surely.
No, I don't think there's anything new. So one thing is trust, right? We talk about trust. I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve by gathering ideas, right? If it's purely creative, like for example, if it's a game, obviously you want to be very creative when you make a game. But you also need to be very clear about what you're trying to achieve with that game. You need to have, you don't want to make a Frankenstein. You want to make something that's going to be cohesive, narratively speaking, visually speaking. You're trying to move people. Like entertainment is about moving people.
You're making a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, in a way, you're making an interactive Hollywood movie.
When you think about it, right? Yeah. It's all the complexity of making a Hollywood movie in a game format.
Yeah.
These days.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a long time ago it was a bit different, but not anymore.
Well, I think a long time ago it was much smaller. So you could make a game with 1 person or 2 people. It's not possible today.
Yeah.
Like if you want to make something.
Pac-Man.
Yeah.
So simple.
So simple. And they're, arguably the best games ever. Like Super Mario Bros. Is arguably the best game of all time. Like narratively speaking, you can't do better than that. You start, you see Mario with Peach, and she got kidnapped, and Mario starts running after, and that's it. And you know what you're supposed to. You're supposed to run after to get back the princess. The games we have today is just very complicated because we've built on top of that, on top of that. And what's really hard with games is when you make a website, when you make an application, the application needs to be functional. Functional is something that can be defined. You can define requirements. Fun, a game needs to be fun. You can't define fun. Fun is something that emerges. Fun is a lucky byproduct of doing things. You can imagine things that could be fun, but then you actually develop them and realize it's not fun. You thought it would be fun, but it's actually fun for 5 seconds, and then it's just like a chore. You're like, yeah. You come up with a gimmick. Oh, that's really cool. You can destroy all buildings. Great. And it's like, but then destroying all the buildings make level design almost impossible, which means we can't have a solid story, right? And so I think making a game is, I don't remember, it's like 60,000 or 100,000 creative decisions.
How many?
60 to 100,000 creative decisions to make a game.
60 creative decisions to make a game. Jeez.
So you have 60,000 things that could go wrong, basically, when you make a game. And the problem with this game, it's actually not a how you call it, like a build-up process. It's a reducive process.
Mm-hmm.
Every wrong decision is going to make your game less fun and less enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
So every time you make a decision, you have something to lose, not something to gain. You have something to lose in your game.
So how do you come up with creativity then? You know, I mean, you're talking me out of it.
Yeah.
How do you talk me into it?
So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with your game, right? I would assume that you want to be original, and I hope that's the case, especially now that the gaming market is a bit saturated. And what is a saturated market? It's a market that lacks originality, basically, where we found a few templates of games that seem to be financially successful, and everybody is going to emulate that because nobody wants to take risk. But then eventually there's so many copycats that people get bored, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Like more than 20,000 games are released every year. You know, but what does it mean to be original? To be original means to take a creative risk, basically. So then the question is, how much risk are you willing to take? Are you willing to stomach? And so there are risk parameters to look into. But then once you have your risk parameters, is how can you actually convert these risk parameters into actual operational decisions? For example, are you one of the sort of time-tested process of making games is making how you call that, like prototypes. And you work on a prototype, you have an idea, something that on paper sounds fun. So you make a prototype, you play. If it's not fun, you just throw it.
Another prototype needed.
Yeah, and maybe you just realize that, okay, it's not as fun as I thought it would be. Maybe you say, oh, there's something in it. It just needs to be tweaked. And we've done something strong. Or you just like, okay, it's not working. You learned.
Yeah, move on.
Do something else, right?
And you talked before about trust a few times. And of course, that's going to be predictability, consistency, all those sort of things. Anything else particularly you come across as a leader that you felt worked well to have people trust you?
So I think one thing that people want to be involved with decisions that are going to impact them. I think it's almost like a rule of thumb in a way. So now a company is not a democracy, as we all know. So you shouldn't make decisions based on a vote, But I think when you're transparent with the decision-making process, where you tell people, we have a decision to make that's going to impact everybody. Could be about a project, could be about a policy, could be about anything. I want your voice. I want to know what you think about it. But this is how the decision is going to be made.
So in that sense, how they elevate their voice to you? You say that, but what's the process? Is it a group discussion? Is it a town hall? Is it the suggestion box? I mean, how do they actually voice that idea?
Group discussions. Personally, I like one-on-ones.
Not so easy to have a 500-person company run one-on-ones.
You can't, and I don't think you can really aggregate and consolidate the voice of 500 people. I don't think that's realistic. So you will have to narrow down the people from whom you're going to ask opinion. And also, not all opinion is the same.
Values different.
Values are different. People's ability to articulate
different. Yep.
A view is also different. You want things that are actionable. You want things that understand the context, understand the reality, operational reality usually. So within these 500 people, there are probably 50 people at most who fit the bill. Now, you also want these people to be able to talk to their people, to their area, area of influence, and be the voice of change. So then it's at most 50 people. 50 people, still a lot of people to do one-on-ones. Obviously, I'm not going to do one-on-ones with 50 people, but I'm probably going to do one-on-ones with 15. And then group discussions. But I'm not town hall. I'm not a big fan. I don't think you can have a very effective conversation in a town hall.
Well, it depends how much you want to use the town hall for. If it's inform everyone what's going on, discussion, that's one thing. If you want to have a debate or have a feedback or get idea gathering, that's a different town halls, especially in Japan.
Especially in Japan, yeah.
But in your company, just on that point, of the 500, what's sort of Japanese to non-Japanese ratio here?
So it's 40% Japanese, 60% non-Japanese, and we have 30 nationalities here.
That's like UN.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's melting pot.
That's another dimension. You should talk about that. How do you manage such a diverse workforce, and particularly, I guess, language? Is the office language Japanese or English, or?
So we have two official languages, English and Japanese, and so any official communication is going to be in both languages. Any announcements will be in both languages. Then when we do, for example, meetings with managers, we will use the language that's the most comfortable with that group. Usually it tends to be English, because most project managers, even Japanese project managers, they speak English. You can't really be project manager at Keywords and not speak English. But most of our clients here are Japanese, so obviously project managers, non-Japanese project managers, are expected to be able to speak Japanese as well. And then for the rest of the staff, it depends a lot on the division. Most of them speak English. So a lot of the conversations tend to be in English. They're all people who live in Japan, so there's always this common thing between us. They chose to be here. That's always like one of the things I like to say. It's this, I chose to be here. When if you're Japanese, you're born in Japan, maybe you haven't chosen
the choice.
The choice was made for you. But I chose to be here, and every people working here, 30 nationals, they chose to be here. They have different reasons, but they tend to be very similar, because there's something they like about Japan, there's something they like about the culture, there's something they like about living here. And so because we have that common thread between us, we can always get back to that. So even when we have cultural differences in the way we see things, we can always get back to that. And also because the client ultimately is Japanese, that's the toll gate. That's what we need. You can't say, oh, but in my culture we don't do that. Sure, but you're in Japan. You're in Japan.
You're in Japan. This is the market.
That's the market. Right?
Yeah. So in terms of culture, you've had a Wizcorp culture which you've brought inside Keywords.
Yeah.
And then you've become, it's like a reverse takeover.
Yeah. In a
Wizcorp has taken over Keywords in Japan, basically.
Well, yes and no. So that's one of the conversations we had when I raised my hand, because there was this worry that's what I would do. And so I had to be agnostic.
So my point there is about culture, because you've got, in any organization, an umbrella culture of the headquarters, global, you're a global company. This is how we work. It's our values, it's our ideas, vision, mission, value, all that stuff. Then you've got Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Then you've got your culture, your individual personal culture. But in your case, you've also got not just Japan culture, you've got these other 30 different nationality cultures as well in the mix. So what have you found has worked well to build a culture that works here, that somehow keeps headquarters happy, because we don't see, Guillaume is going off some major mad
Yeah.
tandem here. He's going off on some, track that we no idea where he's going. He's sort of taking the whole organisation off to the right. He's fitting in, but at the same time, you've got this mix of Japan and non-Japan, and then you've got you personally and your values and how you like to work and how you like things to work. All of this is sort of mixing together.
Yeah.
So how did you think?
You're just
about
raising my anxiety levels right now.
I'm asking you the question I shouldn't ask.
That's the question, isn't it? Like it's. I don't think it's possible to get everybody happy, right? So you have to make compromises, and I think you make these compromises differently at different times. Sometimes you're going to push for the sort of headquarter vision of things. Sometimes you're going to side more on the local things. One thing that's maybe simplifies that a bit is that because we're work for hire business, we don't develop our own games. We don't develop our own software, right? We work for our clients. So in a way, we can always say that's what the client wants.
Okay.
And the headquarter will never say like, oh,
tell the client
screw the client. They need to change. No, it's like
they're going to agree with it, right?
That's what the client wants. Now, it's up to us to articulate that, in a way they can understand. And you can't say, obviously, well, it's different in Japan. Because obviously they hate hearing that. And, and they're right. And it's different in Japan. But how different is that? And what it actually means concretely? And it's always the struggle of finding ways to put that into words. And then finding a way where we can still say, okay, we need to change things in Japan, but we can find a way that aligns with global values and global ways of doing things. Because even if there's some differences, like, well, human, we behave 95% the same way. I like to say that culture to me is a collection of norms and heuristics.
Norms and?
Heuristics.
Heuristics. Okay, what do you mean by heuristics?
Heuristics is like cognitive shortcuts. So norms is more the normative things, how you value things, consciously or not. Heuristics are more like the sort of cognitive shortcuts. Like, for example, in Tokyo, when you take the escalator, you're going to be on the left.
Oh, okay.
You don't think about it.
Unless you're in Osaka.
Yeah, unless you're in Osaka. Just because they like to take a piece on Tokyo. But actually, I believe it started in Osaka. And it's actually Tokyo who did the other way around. But these are heuristics, meaning like you don't think about them. And I think in Japan we tend, and I know it's a debated term, we talk about high context cultures. It's highly normative cultures, so cultures that have a lot of norms and a lot of heuristics. But because of that, they are more predictable, right? That's also why it's easier to trust a stranger in Japan than maybe in other regions, because in Japan you, in a way, expect people to behave in a certain way. Like you're not going to be surprised, you know, walking in Manhattan where you sometimes are on lookout, like there's a weird guy over there,
Well, that's true, isn't it? I mean, the crucible in Japan of making sure everyone basically acts the same, is predictable the same, behaves the same, is very strong.
Very strong.
And individualism is not appreciated. It's actually no way to control that. So it does make, generally speaking, your expectations will be met by the person you meet, as opposed to being shocked that they're doing something quite radical.
And because
like
of that,
Australians, for example.
or French, But that also means, because it's more predictable, I think it's actually easier to articulate in a sense, because when you make a generalization in Japan, you're not going to be too far off. So you can actually make generalizations. And so that's been my approach, to try to make headquarters understand why we need to do things differently here. Then internally here, again, so because culture is norms and heuristics, ultimately building a culture in an organization is how can you incentivize desirable behavior. basically, there's some desirable behavior you want in the organization. And because of us, most of that is driven by client needs or expectations. It's just making sure that we articulate them well, and then that we have processes internally that are going to ensure we have the right behaviors so that they fit client expectations. And in our case, we need to be very articulate because we cannot expect, like if it's a Japanese company, then it's part of what we call the joshiki, right? Everybody's supposed to know that. You can't expect that in a company where you have 30 different nationalities. So you actually need to be very articulate.
You have to create the joshiki, right?
You have to create the joshiki. But that's good because now that's something we do. So we can tell them, instead of like, it's wrong or you don't understand the culture, it's like, okay, that was the wrong behavior. Here's why it was the wrong behavior. And here is the correct behavior. So in this situation, please use this behavior.
If you don't like it, there's the door. Yeah.
If you don't like it, well, with a bit more sensibility. But
ultimately, you either fit in or you fit out.
Yeah.
You make it. This is our core behaviour acceptable, idea. If you don't like that idea, then find another place that is better fit for you. Ultimately.
And you're clearly not going to have success here.
Yeah.
And if you don't have success here, you won't be able to get more opportunities. Like you're not going to have a fulfilling career here.
No.
So.
No. So if someone called you up, Guillaume, I'm being appointed to run our organisation's business in Japan. I'm going to be the CEO there. You've been in Japan forever, and you know all about being an effective leader in Japan. Give me some advice. If you had that question, what would be some advice you'd give them? Given you've told me you've made every possible mistake possible to make, and you've learned from all of these things. So you, I think, have a pretty good viewpoint, perhaps more so than most of the CEOs I meet, just given the nature of how you came up in business. Like an orphan, you were sort of raised by wolves type of thing in Japan in a way. What would be some advice you'd give them?
So the situation would be someone...
They're going to be sent to... They don't know Japan.
They don't know Japan.
They're expat.
Sent to Japan.
They're going to be sent into Japan. Big apartment in the middle of Tokyo. Driver, possibly. Lots of people to take care of. Run the business. Coming from headquarters, usually.
It's going to be tough.
Why?
It's going to be tough.
Why is it going to be tough? It's like paradise here.
Yeah, and it's probably the honeymoon is going to be great. But then I think they're going to feel a huge disconnect between headquarters expectations and what's actually possible. For me, the number one advice, which is the most obvious but the hardest, is learn Japanese and the culture. Because I don't think you can be an effective leader if you can't build trust. I don't think you can build a deep level of trust without speaking the language of the people you deal
Can't
with.
they learn English?
Why should they?
Well, because it's a Gaishke company, for example, and one of the requirements is you speak English. Of course. So you hire people, mainly, key people anyway, who can speak English. So can you take the language part out of it?
I don't think you can. And also, I think every expectation you have is one step toward giving away your agency. It's basically finding reasons why you don't have to do the work. And to me, effective leadership is about agency. Is you take control on things. And if you want to be effective, if you want to be successful in Japan, the best investment you can do on yourself is actually learning the language. It's literally the best thing you can do for a few reasons. Why you'll be able to, but when you'll be able to actually connect with people, and you will show them that you're making the effort. Meaning that I still can't speak Japanese, but I'm working really hard, and they can see that, and then they're like, oh, he cares. Because ultimately, caring is I think the currency here, especially for most Japanese people who, again, generalizing, but work is such an important part of their social life. It is their social life, especially in Tokyo, where the bulk of the population is not born in Tokyo. They're from other regions. And they were sort of disconnect with their extended families coming in Japan. So it's their social circle, right? So they care a lot about that, and they are not very good at expressing their feelings, right? Because you're not supposed to do that. So they actually expect managers who can read their minds and hearts. Really, that's something I've experienced several times.
Which is always a bit unnerving, because as an Aussie, that's not so easy for me. And, trying to read their feeling and what's going on in their mind from an external point of view, I don't know that I've been here a long time. I don't know I'm much good at that. And I don't know that even for themselves, they're much good at it either, because they're not actually necessarily getting it 100% accurate or getting the right interpretation, but they think they are, but are they really? I wonder about that too. So it's quite a vague concept, isn't it?
It's a challenging one. I think it's about finding ways to articulate that together. That's the way I do one-on-ones. Usually it's really to try to find what matters to them. If there is dissonance, even within themselves, like, if there's a dissonance between what they say, the way they behave, and actually what they value, but also because of the understanding of the culture, of the language, you start to learn all these blanket statements, all the words that people use to convey something, but in the vague, not the specific, because they don't know how to convey that specifically. So they are going to use these blanket terms. But when you hear these terms, then you can say, oh, okay, there is a problem, but they don't know what it is. And so then you try to dig deeper and be more on the specific. It's, for example, like, it's like we have this question, which is a really bad question, is asking people how they are doing. When we're told at school that a good question is an open question. It's a question that can be answered by yes and no. And so how are you is actually a very open question, but it's so generic that it's almost impossible to answer this question. Like, what do you mean? Like short-term, long-term, like how your feelings work, like where do you even start, right? But if you ask, for example, what's on your mind right now? Or then if you want more casual, okay, what did you do during the weekend? What did you enjoy doing? Or like, did you learn anything new by doing that? Like, or you spent some time with your kids, like, is there anything you learned from that? Or, if you get in details, then people start to open more, they start to give you more details. But again, if you don't have the language ability to discuss with them, every time they're going to speak in English, they're going to add a filter. They add a layer. And that's distance. You disconnect, basically. And so even if they could speak English, I don't think at the end of the day, they would still be able to trust you, really, because there's so many filters between. So learning the language and having a translator is not going to cut it.
Why?
It's a layer. It's a layer you have no control on. So you have to assume that they're doing the right translation.
But also I find too, with people who don't speak the language, and if we were dealing in Korean or something, or Russian or something, which is a language I don't speak, and I had an interpreter, I know I would become too reliant on the interpreter, not just for the language translation, but for the culture interpretation as well, and the business interpretation. And often they're not business people, they are just linguists.
Yes.
And they actually have very little business acumen and experience and knowledge, but somehow they're the lifeline, and you start to ask their opinion about the business, which is extremely bad idea. Or even worse, ask it, but then take any notice of it. That's even worse. So I always think about translation. Remember, their skill set is not business knowledge, acumen, experience, insight. It is purely language transfer.
I totally. Now, what I think you would be doing differently is, because you've been in Japan for a long time, because you know the language, I think you also are a bit more intentional and aware when you work with a translator.
Yes.
You're not going to use vague language. You're not going to use. I still remember that that's one of the things I would tell my CEO when sometimes he likes to come to Japan, visit clients, and we would go and see a client, and he starts throwing a lot of these cool words, and it's like it's stop using these words. Like it's
be more basic.
Be more basic. Like stop talking about headwinds and we have a strong balance sheet. It's like no, we have strong cash flow. Okay, but these terms are complicated. They are not going to translate well. They may confuse people. And even if the person can speak English, don't assume they are as fluent as you are.
The thing too, I noticed is when you have consecutive translation, you have to be very disciplined because you are speaking without notes off the top of your head. You get into a particular line, then there's a break while they translate into Japanese. Then your brain has to remember where you are in that sequence to pick up the next bit and keep it going, because you can quite easily sort of go off on a tangent here because you sort of lost the track of where you were going with what you're talking because you got disrupted by the translation. I remember we had a very famous Australian Olympic swimmer came to Japan many years ago when I was in Osaka, and I remember we were at an event and he gave a speech in English and it was interpreted, but I was impressed at how skillful he was to keep it going. He had a thought and that thought got partially translated, then the next part of the thought came out. He just kept the whole thing going one time after another. And I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty impressive.
That's skill.
Because, Japan, the language can actually take a bit longer.
Yes.
You always have this problem, like 100 words in English is like 150 words in Japanese. So the breaks are long. Yeah. So that's also something in interpretation too, to keep your theme, ignore what they're saying, keep remembering what you're going to say and let them do the work for you rather than being distracted and having your brain on fire with something else.
A piece of advice I would also give is embrace silence. So especially in the West, we're scared of silence. Silence is kind of awkward. Like, so if there is silence, people are going to fill it with stuff. We have that in France, we have that everywhere, where when nobody's talking, like, oh, someone needs to say something. That's not the case in Japan.
So you mean silence is golden in Japan, no problem, right?
That's completely fine. So for example, one thing, and I guess it connects also to the asking ideas and stuff like that, but giving an opinion in Japan is never free. So when you ask someone, what do you think about something? It's not a casual question. Like it's a casual question in the West where like people, oh yeah, my opinion is not in Japan. When you ask that, 1,000 things go through their heads. And it's like, okay, am I going to be judged? Is it going to be seen as inappropriate if I'm giving a personal opinion?
What if you don't like my opinion?
What if you don't like my opinion? Why it feels
what if
like
people laugh at my opinion?
There's so many things. So asking a simple question like this.
And should I be giving the opinion? Because so-and-so joined the company before me and so-and-so's older than me and someone's higher ranked than me and they're a man and I'm a woman. I mean, as you say, the computation level of energy that's going on inside their head when you say, what do you think?
What do you think?
It's just like extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. So it's a big cost to ask someone an opinion. So, but then if you do, so I've seen a lot of people, even within an organization. So for example, they're based overseas and they manage people here, right? And so they're going to do meeting. It's supposed to be brainstorming and they're going to ask opinion at the end. And so she's like, okay, what do you think? And so, and she maybe waits, or he or she waits like 5 seconds and nobody's talking. So then she's going to add more. It's like, well, you don't have views. And I was like, wait, you know what? Just stop talking for 2 minutes. I guarantee you someone is going to start talking. Just wait. When I do one-on-ones with people, I do the same. Sometimes I can see there's something, but they don't have quite the words. I just shut up and I just wait.
What's the longest you've waited?
10 minutes? It was very long, but yeah.
I did an hour.
An hour? Just waiting?
I asked, there was a problem in the branch with the manager and this person, a young woman I met, and I said, look, I believe you have some issues. I'm here to help you. Please share with me what is the concern for you. 5 minutes go by. 15 minutes go by. 20 minutes go by. I'm thinking, I wonder what she's going to ask. Tell me something. 35 minutes go by. 45 minutes go by. I didn't speak. I just sat there. Yeah. And it got to an hour. And in the end, she said, I can't tell you.
Okay.
I still don't know what the problem was. But
yeah,
it was something for me that I realised, damn, I can sit there for an hour and wait if I have to. I've got that. I never imagined that would ever happen. If at the beginning she said, well, I can't tell you, okay, we're done. Or someone said, look, you have to sit there for an hour. I say, no way, an hour, I waste my time. But I did it. So, my margin is pretty high, I think, after that experience.
1 hour is wow.
And you know what it's like. You're sitting, right? You're there. You can see.
Yeah.
You can see the wheels turning.
You see the wheels turning. I avoid eye contact. It depends on the person. But sometimes you can see that people prefer avoiding eye contact. So then I avoid eye contact.
Yeah, there was no eye contact in this case. Yeah, she was
I'm just in the room. I'm just in the room. Give you the space you need. And I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to. But we feel the urge of, like, we're scared of silence.
I think Australians particularly, because it's a very egalitarian society, and if we are having a breakdown in communication, we feel there's a breakdown in the relationship,
right?
And we feel very threatened by that breakdown in the relationship. So when we store the relationship, so we want to say something to get the relationship back on track. So I think for Australians doing the Japanese, it's quite difficult. Silence, as you say, you have to brief people. Listen,
interesting.
If you ask a question, shut up, don't speak.
That being
Be comfortable with
said,
silence.
Having many colleagues from Australia, I think that Australians do better than Americans because they tend to have a higher EQ. I do find Australians very, a bit like Canadians maybe, like they're much more. What's the right term? I don't want to offend. Like, I'm going to offend someone.
Doesn't matter. Go for it. Don't worry about it.
More civilized in a way, in a sense of, caring about what others feel and think, and not wanting to be offending. One thing I really find with Australians is they don't want to offend others. And so, and I think usually they Japanese people do like Australians, which is also fitting because time zone wise it's convenient.
Yeah, it's easy. It's 1 hour difference or 2 hours difference. Yeah. In terms of other things that you would give advice, I mean, you've talked about language. You've talked about silence. You've talked about a number of things, which is great. Anything else you'd advise them?
So usually when you're sent from the headquarters and you're in Japan, you're supposed to have a mission, right? And it's usually about change. You're supposed to change something.
Theoretically leading to an improvement.
And I mean, unless it's a newly started branch, there was probably a country manager before. So that's going to be a change. Anyways, so different leadership. Usually, we need you to improve whatever metrics, right? To bring about change in an organization, you need to have a very strong narrative, right? But that narrative needs to resonate with people.
So on that point, Chris was in the job forever.
Yeah.
Maybe he even started.
Yeah.
He started Japan, right?
Yeah, he started Japan, yeah.
So you come in.
Yeah.
It's a big change.
Yeah.
Founder, literally, long-term, massive expansion, total success, incredible revenue growth, perfect, everything wonderful. Then you come in.
Yeah.
So what was the narrative for you taking over? I mean, you were not coming from outside because you'd been brought inside, but inside in a bubble because it was still Wizcorp. We're sitting within the machine.
Yeah.
It wasn't integrated. perfectly yet, but so they had some semi-independence. But what was the narrative you brought to that case?
Yeah. So there were a lot of things also going on in the organization. The organization was also, we had a new CEO, which started just maybe 6 months before me, or maybe a year before me. So with a new CEO, new values, new principles, leadership principles, and etc. And we had this thing we called One Keywords, where the idea is we wanted to be more than just a federation of studios. We wanted to create something that is, sort of collective consciousness across the group, right?
It's massive global symbiosis or something.
Yeah, symbiosis of sorts. We don't know how it's going to look like, because obviously we still want studios to have strong ownership on what they're doing. We want them to be leaders. So we don't want to tell them how to do things, but we still want like shared values, right? So there was a big effort globally. So that was one of the things I would sort of surf on at the same time. But to me, the core narrative was about, okay, what's the next phase of evolution for Keywords in Japan? Keywords has built a very strong reputation when it comes to localization in gaming, clearly. We were the number one, at least in terms of reputation. Nobody knows we do dev. Nobody knows we actually have the full range of services. So there's an opportunity to build that brand, build that recognition. And with Wizcorp, that brings a much smaller scope, but it's been around about the same time, like the same length. Like we started in 2008 and they started Keywords in 2009 in Japan. So
longer, in fact.
Longer, just one year longer. And we bring like the sort of technical proficiency, technical reputation in gaming. The narrative I was trying to build was, okay, what is Keywords trying to achieve in Japan? Based on all the huge network we have, of studios, of all the talent we have, etc. Like, what are we trying to achieve in Japan? And that sort of common vision didn't exist. And so that's really what I came up with, of saying, I believe that Keywords can be highly relevant with Japanese clients doing that. And at the time, it was this big vision. It was mainly about what we call AAA games, like the AAA movies in Hollywood. But this idea of, especially for the last 15, 20 years, Japanese games haven't been successful globally as they used to. They've been highly successful in the 90s, early 2000s, and then from there was a huge decline. There are many reasons for that. I need a few more hours to talk about that.
That's another podcast.
That's another podcast. But they still want to be more successful. Like, they're still trying to bring back the sort of golden age of Japanese gaming. And what we felt is we were uniquely positioned to bridge the gap, keep the Japanese creativity, their originality, which has been their strength from the beginning, but giving them access to world-class talent. Because to me, to make a world-class game, you need world-class talent. And that's what we have. And so I saw that opportunity to really build that narrative of, we can help you be successful globally again in this AA, AAA gaming. That was the vision. And I think it's a vision that everybody connected with, even people doing localization or LQA, and it's like, yeah, we want to help these successful games.
That's great. What about your definition of leadership? How would you define leadership?
So I have maybe a bit more practical definition. To me, leadership is the ability to influence others, hopefully toward a common beneficial goal. But it's really basically the ability to influence, to rally people. So that's why it has many shapes. You can influence others simply by being an expert. You can influence others by being a moon maker. Like, you have these people, like this beacon of positive energies, and somehow, when they're not in the office, everybody's like, down, and then when they're back, like, everybody is up. That's a form of leadership. You can be a leader by just listening to people. Like, a good listener can be a good leader. Just helping people to articulate their thoughts, right? So to me, leadership is really the ability to influence people, and to be able to lead, I think you need a strong narrative. So to me, it starts with values. So you need shared values, a narrative that really brings the why of these values, right? that's the vision. That's really what. And then building the trust through consistency, through predictability, through vulnerability, so all the things we talk about, and then really acting influence. And there's so many ways you can lead. If you're a new leader in an organization, existing organization, it's also finding the people who, you don't need to have formal authority to be a leader. And you're going to have a lot of unofficial leaders in your organizations, and you want to know who they are. Because if they don't follow you, you're going to have problems. So yeah, it's how, this is, to me, leadership is really the ability to influence.
Well, thank you, Guillaume. I think, we have got a 20-hour podcast conversation potential here, but we don't have 20 hours, so I'm going to pull it up here. But thank you. Fascinating. Really fascinating discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.